Join me as we look at what really matters on What's the Noise Media. We are looking at the narrative that Shedeur is not a good QB, and this narrative has us quite upset. Some media members believe he's not any good based on having a low QB rating after his first 7 games, and because he was not named the starting quarterback over Watson. But this narrative is false and very misleading, and we are going to tell you and show you why. This is not about Deshaun Watson being way better than Shedeur Sanders. This has less to do with, did Deshaun actually outperform Shedeur? This has to do with an unseen narrative that many analysts believe that the decision had more to do with organizational pressure that has Watson as the starting quarterback. But the narrative that Shedeur is not an NFL-level quarterback is a blatant falsehood, rooted in anti-I don't like Shedeur propaganda. Keep in mind that Kenny Pickett was here and no one, and I mean no one, said he was just not an NFL-level quarterback. What some may say that he is probably a backup quarterback, like what I have heard about Dillian Gabriel. What's the Noise Media has prepared for you a video on what and the narrative should be for one Shedeur Sanders. Oh, one last thing. Tell me why many in the national media, like ESPN, Get Up, and others, say that Shedeur should be the starter, while some in the local media say, well, see, because Watson was named the starter, that has to mean that Shedeur is an awful QB. Just tell me why. Comment below. Please like and subscribe. We tell you like it is. Watch this.
When a franchise uses the #1 overall pick on a quarterback, they are making a highly public bet. The expectation is that this single player will immediately erase years of organizational failure. The modern sports media cycle doesn't offer a grace period. Rookies are evaluated on a rapid, unforgiving curve, with pundits and fans demanding MVP-level play from their very first snap. Caleb Williams is the most recent highly touted prospect to step into this exact pressure cooker. Almost immediately, his early statistical returns sparked widespread panic among analytical fans and fantasy managers. But reacting entirely to these initial numbers often leads to panic selling. Managers who misinterpret standard developmental friction as permanent failure end up surrendering significant long-term equity. To understand this panic, we have to look at the specific metric driving the headlines right now, the first 7 games comparison. This comparison table shows exactly what people are measuring against. Look at Patrick Mahomes. In his first 7 starts, he racked up 2,149 yards and 18 touchdowns, posting a 111.7 passer rating. Then there's Justin Herbert. He exploded out of the gate with 2,146 yards and 17 touchdowns, hitting a 104.7 rating. When you put Caleb Williams next to them, the gap is glaring. In his first 7 games, he managed 1,448 yards, 9 touchdowns, and an 85.6 rating. The question we have to answer is whether Mahomes and Herbert represent the new baseline for a successful franchise quarterback, or if they are extreme statistical outliers born from unique environments. To figure that out, we need to shift our focus away from evaluating the player in a vacuum and look closely at the infrastructure they inherit. We can map this by plotting draft position against the quality of a team's supporting cast in a rookie's first year. This reveals what we call the outlier standard. Patrick Mahomes sat for an entire year behind a veteran quarterback on a team that was already making the playoffs. Justin Herbert entered an offense that already featured elite, established weapons like Keenan Allen right from the start. Caleb Williams, however, was drafted first overall to be a day-1 starter and was forced to carry a roster in the middle of a massive rebuild. The difference in ecosystem pressure is stark. Williams took a punishing 23 sacks in those first 7 games. Herbert took 14. Mahomes took almost 0 hits. Expecting a day-1 rookie on a rebuilding team to match the production of players stepping into heavily fortified ecosystems creates a deceptive, mathematically impossible standard for success. Academic research into the history of the NFL draft actually quantifies this disconnect between a player's draft position and their early on-field production. It points to a phenomenon known as the draft capital tax. Highly drafted quarterbacks are almost always forced into immediate, high-volume starting roles on poorly constructed teams. This scatterplot shows the direct relationship between where a player is drafted and the number of pass attempts they are forced to make early in their career. Look closely at the upper left cluster. The quarterbacks taken at the very top of the draft are the ones handling massive, disproportionate volume. The data shows that being forced into this high volume early on correlates very poorly with long-term efficiency metrics, like defense-adjusted value over average. Without proper offensive infrastructure, these rookies have to play low-efficiency hero ball simply to keep their flawed teams competitive on Sundays. High draft status forces these players to gain early experience, but it comes at the direct cost of early efficiency. Short-term statistical comparisons completely miss this reality. For a clear historical parallel, look at Jared Goff. As a #1 overall pick, his rookie campaign was widely considered a disaster, derailed by a severely lacking offensive system and 0 reliable weapons. When a young quarterback is stuck behind a poor offensive line with no weapons, the structural math leads directly to poor stats. But watch what happens when an organization executes a structural pivot. The Rams paired Goff with an elite running game and a modern offensive scheme, and the results flipped entirely. Goff's statistics exploded after his rookie year. His early struggles were an accurate reflection of his environment, not a lack of innate talent. Judging any rookie strictly on their initial isolated box scores prevents us from seeing the massive impact of the offensive system and the upgrades that will eventually arrive. Once we apply this context, we stop viewing Caleb Williams as a failing prospect. Instead, we can see he is on a highly predictable, standard developmental arc. Evaluating a rookie requires a scorecard that goes beyond the raw stats, factoring in sack rates, the team ecosystem, and the heavy burden of draft expectations. For dynasty fantasy managers, this structural insight dictates a specific approach to a player like Williams. Holding on to him, or actively buying shares during this perceived statistical dip, is the optimal move to capitalize on the market's overreaction. The clear trade-off here is that you need extreme patience. You have to stomach a low-efficiency rookie season while the surrounding roster catches up to the quarterback's talent. For analytical NFL fans, recognizing the draft capital tax reframes how you watch the game. You have to step away from raw counting stats like yards and touchdowns and weigh contextual efficiency metrics instead. Making this analytical shift gives you a highly accurate, predictive model for understanding who will actually succeed in the league long-term. It requires ignoring the reactionary week-to-week media cycle in favor of delayed analytical gratification. True quarterback evaluation comes down to separating the player's raw talent from the tax they pay for being drafted early. Early friction is the norm. Instant superstardom is an illusion.